Nihilism is the only reality, and every great philosopher knew it. What if everything you are working towards right now, the career, the relationship, the reputation, the legacy, is worth exactly nothing? Not nothing because you failed, not nothing because you chose wrong, nothing because nothing was ever worth anything to begin with. No purpose, no cosmic plan, no reason the universe placed you here, no final destination your life is building towards, just atoms assembled by accident, experiencing themselves briefly and then dissolving back into the void from which they came. I know what you are feeling right now, resistance, maybe even anger, because every part of your life is built on the assumption that it matters, that your choice matters, that the people you love matters, that what you build and suffer and sacrifice for is meaningful. But what if the assumption that underlies literally everything you do, was never true? What if it was a story, a comfortable, necessary, beautifully constructed lie? What if nihilism, the most feared, most avoided, most dismissed philosophy in human history, is not a pathology? What if it is simply the truth? We are going to go all the way in. We are going to look at what the greatest mind in human history concluded when they pushed their thinking past the point of comfort. What will look at the Schopenhauer's case that suffering is the engine of all existence, and Nietzsche's terrifying announcement that God is dead, and what it really costed us. At Camus and the absurdity of human condition, at Heidegger's confrontation with beings and nothingness, at Bertrand Russell's cosmic nihilism, at Ecclesiastes, the oldest nihilism text in the world. And by the end of this video, you will have to decide for yourself, is nihilism the darkest corner of the philosophy, or is it only corner where the lights are finally on? Let's begin. Part 1. What is nihilism really? Before we go anywhere, we need to be precise, because nihilism is one of the most misused words in popular culture. People throw it around to meaning depressed or cynical or doesn't care about anything. This is not what nihilism is. Nihilism, at its philosophical core, is a family of related chains about reality, specifically about whether reality contains any inherent value, meaning, purpose, or moral truth. There are several distinct types. Existential nihilism, the view that human life has no inherent meaning or purpose, not that the meaning is hard to find, not that the meaning requires effort, that it does not exist as a feature of reality, waiting to be discovered. Moral nihilism, the view that there are no objective moral truths, no action is objectively right or wrong. These are the categories human invented and projected onto a universe that contains no such properties. Epistemological nihilism, the view that knowledge itself is impossible, or at least radically uncertain. We cannot be confident that our perception and reasoning gives us access to truth. Cosmic nihilism, the view that on the scale of the universe humanity is utterly insignificant, not just small, meaninglessly small. The universe did not intend us, it does not notice us, it will continue long after we are gone, completely indifferent to the fact that we ever existed. Now, the important distinction. Nihilism is not the same as despair. Many people who hold nihilistic position about the objective meaning of life are not suicidal, not depressed, not walking through the world as a grey misery. Nihilism is a metaphysical claim, a claim about structure of reality. What do you do with that claim is a separate question entirely. Some of the most life-affirming thinkers in history were, at their philosophical core, nihilist. Nietzsche arguably was. Camus definitely flirted with it. The question was never whether the universe provided meaning. The question was, what do we do when we accept that it doesn't? The first, let us make the case that it doesn't. Part 2, the universe doesn't know that you exist. The scientific case. Let us start not with the philosophy but with physics, because before we get to what the philosopher said, we should appreciate the world they were looking at. The observable universe is approximately 93 billion light years in diameter. It contains an estimate of 2 trillion galaxies. Each galaxy contains, on an average, hundreds of billions of stars. Many of those stars have planets. The Milky Way galaxy alone, our galaxy, the one containing the only home we have ever known, is so large that if you try to drive across it at highway speed, it would take you more than 400 quintillion years. Earth has existed for approximately 4.5 billion years. Life has existed on it for roughly 3.7 billion years. Homo sapiens, our species, the species that writes philosophy and builds civilization and tells itself that its existence is meaningful, has existed for perhaps 300,000 years. The universe is approximately 13.8 billion years old. Modern human civilization is about 6,000 years old. We are, on any honest accounting, we are, on any honest accounting, a microscopic accident on a pale blue dot in an unremarkable corner of one galaxy among 2 trillion. We did not arrive by design, we arrived by the blind, indifferent, purely mechanical process of natural selection, a process that selects for reproductive success, not for meaning, for happiness, not for purpose. Bertrand Russell, one of the greatest logicians of 20th century, drew the unavoidable conclusion from his pictures with clarity that remains devastating. He argued that all human achievement, all of the civilization, all of art and science and love and philosophy is built on the firm foundation of undying despair that the universe is alien and indifferent to human concerns, that we are accidental byproducts of cosmic force that produced us by billions of years and will continue after us with complete indifference to whether we ever existed. Russell was not trying to make you feel bad, he was trying to be honest, and what he was being honest about is gap, the enormous, vertiginous gap between how large the universe is and how small we are, between how much we feel for our lives, between how much we feel our lives matter and how little evidence there is that they matter to anything beyond themselves. The question nihilism forces on us is this: if meaning is not written into the structure of the cosmos, if no God placed it there, if evolution certainly didn't, if physics contains nothing that resembles purpose, then where does meaning come from? And the answer most people avoid: nowhere. Meaning comes from nowhere but us. We invented it, we needed it, and needing something does not make it real. Part 3: Schopenhauer, Life is Suffering, and Suffering is All. Let us now enter the most systematic, pessimistic philosophy in Western history, built by the man who is, without any serious competition, the king of philosophical despair, Arthur Schopenhauer. Schopenhauer's starting point is deceptively simple. Look at life, not life as you wish it were, not life as a religion promises it can be, life as it actually is, in its raw biological reality. What do you see? You see creatures who are hungry and who suffers from hunger until they eat and then grow hungry again. You see animals that strive ceaselessly, not towards any goals, not towards any fulfillment, but simply because striving is what living things do. And you see those creatures dying one by one, leaving no traces in a universe that was there before them and will be there after them. For Schopenhauer, the engine of all this, what he calls the will, a blind, purposeless, insatiable force that drives all living things, not a rational planner, not a benevolent creator, a mindless hunger and endless striving with no destination. And here is his devastating argument, the one that makes him the darkest thinker in the Western philosophy. Willing necessarily produces suffering. Here is the logic: when you desire something, you experience a state of lack. The wanting itself is painful. When you get what you desire, satisfaction is brief, because the will immediately regenerates a new desire. You are never done wanting. There is no final state of fulfillment where all desire is satisfied and life becomes permanently good. The structure the structure of desire itself ensures that The structure of desire itself ensures that satisfaction is always temporary and suffering is always returning. He describes this with an image that should haunt you. Life swings like a pendulum, back and forth between suffering and boredom. When you want something and don't have it, you suffer. When you get it and desire it briefly quieted, you are bored. Boredom, as Schopenhauer argues, is its own form of suffering. The will, momentarily without an object, turning its restlessness inwardly. There is no escape from this cycle within life. The will cannot be satisfied, only momentarily distracted. And then Schopenhauer delivers his most radical conclusion: there is no happiness, only temporary relief from suffering. What we call happiness, those moments of joy, pleasure, satisfaction, are not positive experience, they are negative experience. The temporary absence of pain, the removal of burden that immediately begins to reassemble itself. Think about this in your own life. Think about something you desperately wanted: a job, a relationship, a purchase, a goal. Remember how badly you wanted it. Remember the relief and joy when you got it. And then, be honest, remember how quickly it normalized, how the wanting resumed, how the commitment dissolved into the next desire. This is not your personal failure. This is not something therapy can fix. This is this is Schopenhauer argues the structure of conscience itself. The will always wants, and the wanting is suffering. Now apply this not just to human life but to all history. Every civilization that rose and fell, every empire built on suffering and dissolved into dust, every generation that lived, strived, suffered, and died, leaving the world exactly as they found it, a theater of blinding, striving, inevitable decay. What was the point? Schopenhauer's answer, in his most honest moment, was: there was none. The will has no purpose. It drives us because it is what we are, but the direction it drives us in is nowhere, or rather, it is a circular. We suffer to survive, we survive to suffer more, and eventually we die, and the will continues in other forms, in other creatures, in endless cycle of purpose striving. The only genuine escape from the will's tyranny for Schopenhauer was aesthetic experience, the, the rare moment of art, music, and beauty where all the will falls silent and we exist briefly as pure knowledge, as pure knowing subject rather than striving animals. And the ultimate escape, asceticism, the systematic denial of desires, a kind of voluntary dying to the world as will. But these are, as best, pauses. The will always returns, the suffering always resumes. For Schopenhauer, purpose is not feature of reality, it is a projection. A story of striving will tells itself to justify its own motion towards nowhere. Part 4: Nietzsche, God is dead and we killed him. Now we meet the philosopher who changed everything, who took the nihilistic darkness of Schopenhauer and turned it into something volcanic: Friedrich Nietzsche. And we must begin with the most famous sentence in the history of philosophy: God is dead, God remains dead, and we have killed him. This is from Nietzsche in 1882, work The Gay Signs, spoken by the madman who runs into the marketplace carrying a lantern in a broad daylight, looking for a god. The people in the marketplace laugh. God? They don't believe in God. The madman turns on them in horror. We have killed him, you and I. But how? But how have we done this? How were we able to drink up the sea? The passage is almost always misread. Nietzsche is not announcing atheism as a personal opinion, he is announcing a cultural catastrophe on which Western civilization had been built for 2000 years. Here is what Nietzsche understood with a clarity that most of his contemporaries lacked: God was never only a religious belief, God was the anchor for everything. God provided the source for objective moral truth. God said what was right and what was wrong, and so right and wrong were real, cosmic, binding. God provided the source of cosmic meaning. Human life mattered because God had created it for a purpose. God provided the source of objective value. Some things were genuinely, transcendently good because God had declared them so. Science, the scientific revolution, Darwin, the Enlightenment, had killed God, not by proving that he didn't exist, but by making the belief in him untaintable for anyone who thought clearly. The mechanism of nature had been explained without reference to divine intervention. The origin of a species has been explained by the blind natural selection. The place of humanity in the cosmos had been revealed as a peripheral accident. Nietzsche saw what really meant in a way that almost no one else had faced. If God is dead, then all the values that were grounded in God are now groundless. Not just religious values, all of it. The belief that human is sacred, groundless. The belief that there is a purpose to history, groundless. The belief that suffering has a redemptive meaning, groundless. The belief that the universe cares about what happens to us, groundless. As Heidegger later summarized the Nietzsche's insight, if God as a suspensory ground and goal of all reality is dead, then nothing more remains to which man can cling and by which he can orient himself. This is what Nietzsche means when he describes the event as so enormous that we have not yet grasped it. The death of God is not a theological event, it is a metaphysical earthquake. The ground on which all meanings stood has given away. And now Nietzsche divided into two Nietzsches, the Dionysian and the Visionary. As a Dionysian, he described he describes with terrifying precision what happens to a culture when its metaphysical foundation collapses. He calls it nihilism, not active, declares declared nihilism. Most people in the post-God world don't become police, don't become philosophical nihilists. They do something more dangerous. They keep the old values but hollow them out. They keep talking about human dignity, about meaning, about purpose, but they no longer have any framework that justifies their claims. They become what Nietzsche calls the last man, a small, comfortable, purposeless creature who seeks only warmth and distraction, who have no great passion or no great goal, who blinks and say, "We have invented happiness," while drowning in meaninglessness. They don't have the courage to acknowledge. Does this deception feel familiar? As a visionary, Nietzsche insisted that the death of God, horrible as it is also an opportunity. If there is no cosmic source of value, if God is not providing the rules, then values must be created, not discovered. The human beings who faces this truth without flinching, who does not retreat into the old illusion or new ideologies, who accept the full weight of the meaningless universe and decides to create meaning anyway. This person is what Nietzsche calls the Ubermensch, the Overman, not a superhero, a human being who has grown up enough to stop wanting for the universe to tell them who they are. But here is the crucial philosophical point that most Nietzsche enthusiasts miss. Nietzsche's Ubermensch does not discover meaning, they create it, and created meaning is not the same as inherent meaning. If you created values, you are the author of them, but that meaning are not written into reality. The universe remains indifferent, the nihilism remains. Nietzsche's response to this nihilism is not to disrupt. Nietzsche's response to this nihilism is not to disapprove it, it is to affirm life in spite of it. His concept of amor fati, love of fate, is the idea of willing your life exactly as it is, not because it is cosmically meaningful, but because it is yours. His concept of eternal recurrence, would you want your life to repeat exactly as it has been, indefinitely, infinitely, is not a metaphysical claim, but a psychological test. Could you say yes to your life so fully that you would choose it forever? For Nietzsche, the answer to nihilism is not to find an alternate source of cosmic meaning. There is none. The answer is to become strong enough not to need one. This is philosophically a form of nihilism that has learned a dance. Part 5, Camus and the Absurd, the Universe's Silence. Now we arrive at perhaps the most honest confrontation with nihilism in 20th century's philosophy. Albert Camus. Camus begins with a question he calls the only truly serious philosophical question: why not commit suicide? Not a dramatic question, not a disturbed question, the most rational question: if life has no meaning, if life has no inherent meaning, if universe is indifferent, if our suffering signifies nothing, if everything we built will ultimately be erased, then why continue? What exactly is the case for going on? What is the chemist? This is what Camus calls the absurd, not something weird or funny. The absurd is a specific philosophical concept, the collision between two facts. Fact 1: human beings have insatiable need for meaning, clarity, purpose. We are creatures who cannot live without narrative. We ask why in every breath. We need our suffering to mean something. We need our existence to be pointed at something. Fact 2: the universe answers none of this question. The universe is, in Camus' word, silent. It does not speak to human longing. It does not provide the meaning we demand. It offers stars, physics, biology, and nothing that resembles purpose. The absurd is the gap between the human cry for meaning and the universe's absolute silence in response. The gap cannot be closed. You cannot close it by finding God. Camus calls this philosophical suicide, jumping into a conclusion that the evidence does not support simply because you cannot bear the alternatives. You cannot close it by embracing nihilism and stop caring because the need for meaning is built into what you are. You cannot simply turn it off. You cannot close it by dying, which Camus rejects as a surrender, letting the universe win. The only honest response, Camus argues, is to live in the gap, to face the absurd without blinking, to acknowledge that the universe is silent and refuse to fill the silence with lies, to keep asking the question knowing that there are no answers, and to live fully, passionately anyway. This is why he tells us we must imagine Sisyphus happy, condemned by the god to roll a boulder up a mountain for eternity, only to watch it roll back down again and again. Forever is the image of a human existence. We build things that crumbles, we love people who die, we create meaning that the universe erases. We strive for goals that once reached generate new goals. The stone always rolls back. Camus asks us to imagine the Sisyphus on the walk back down the mountain after the stone has rolled. Before he begins again in a walk, there is a moment of clarity. Sisyphus knew exactly what his situation is. He has no illusion. He knows that the stone will fall again. He knows that this is forever, and this is knowledge. In that perfect, undeceived awareness of his condition, he is, Camus says, superior to his fate. The rebellion against the meaninglessness is itself is a form of meaning, not cosmic meaning, not meaning that the universe endorses, but meaning that human beings insist on, in a full defiance of a universe that offers none now. And this is the philosophical knife edge. Does Camus disapprove nihilism? No, he accepts it as the baseline description of reality. He simply refuses to let it be the final word on how to live. The universe is meaningless, life is absurd, and we choose to live passionately anyway. This is not a refutation of nihilism, it is a human response to it. Part 6: Heidegger, Beings Towards Death. Martin Heidegger approached the question of nihilism from the most fundamental angle possible, the question of being itself. His central argument in Being and Nothingness, and in his interpretation of Nietzsche, is that nihilism is not an accident of modern thought, it is the inevitable destination of Western metaphysics, going all the way back to Plato. Here is the argument in a plain language. From Plato onwards, Western philosophy has organized reality into two tiers: the visible world of ordinary things and the higher invisible world of essence, forms, gods, the real, the purpose, meaning. and the value of every single existence was always derived from this higher tier. Things meant something because they pointed towards the divine, the ideal, the transcendent. The scientific revolution and the Enlightenment dismantled the higher tier. Science showed that the universe is explainable without reference to any transcendence. Technology converted the world into a resource. Things have value only insofar as they are useful, calculable, exploitable. When the higher tier collapses, what remains? The lower tier, the ordinary world of objects and processes, stripped of the transcendent meaning that was borrowed from above, and without that borrowed meaning, there is no meaning at all. For Heidegger, this is what Nietzsche was actually diagnosing with: God is dead, not atheism, not atheism, the collapse of entire metaphysical framework that gave Western life its orientation. But Heidegger goes further than Nietzsche. He believed Nietzsche's solution, the ubermasculating values through the will to power, is not an escape from nihilism, but it is most complete expression, because the will to power is still an expression of the Western drive to dominate, control, and impose. The same impulse that created nihilism in the first place. Nietzsche tries to leap over nihilism using the same muscle as generated it. What Heidegger offers instead is a turn towards authentic existence. His concept of being towards death is crucial here. He argues that the only way to live authentically, to escape the comfortable, distracted, inauthentic mode of existence that he calls das man, that they self, is to confront your own finite, is confront your own finitude, is to confirm your own finitude directly. Death of Heidegger is not primarily a biological event. It is most certain a fact of your existence, and the one you are most systematically encouraged to deny. You keep busy, distracted, social, anything not to sit with the knowledge that you are going to die, that the person reading this will one day simply not exist. Authentic existence means holding your death before you, not morbidly, but honestly. Letting the certainty of death strips away all the things you do because society expects them, because distraction is comfortable, because it's easier than asking what actually matters to you. Death is the absolute nihilism that waits at the end of every life, and rather than hiding from it, Heidegger says we must use it. The nothing at the end is not the enemy of meaning, it is the condition that makes genuine meaning possible, because it is the pressure that forces you to choose what actually matters rather than drifting through everything that doesn't. Part 7. Oldest nihilist text in the world, Ecclesiastes. Here is something almost nobody tells you in the conversation about nihilism. The oldest, most sustained meditation on the meaninglessness of human existence is not by Nietzsche, not by Schopenhauer, not by any 19th century German philosopher. It is in the Bible, the book of Ecclesiastes, written somewhere between 5th and 3rd centuries BEC, between with one of the most jaggering sentences in all the ancient literature. Vanity of vanitas, all is vanity. The Hebrew word translates as vanity is hebel, literally beneath or waver, something that appears for a moment and then is gone. Something is insubstantial. The teacher, the anonymous voice of Ecclesiastes, surveys everything that human beings pursue: wisdom, pleasure, work, wealth, love, legacy, and his conclusion again and again is the same: Hebel, vapor, breathe, gone. He watches the wise man and the fool both die and be forgotten equally. He watches great works crumble. He watches one generation rise and another fall, and the sun continues rising and the river continues flowing. Indifferent to all of it, he asks what advantage a man has from all his toil under the sun, and his honest answer is none that lasts. This is extensional nihilism, written inside the sacred scripture of one of the world's greatest religions. The very tradition most associated with cosmic meaning and divine purpose could not suppress this voice, the voice that looked at human life clearly, stripped of consolation, and said, There is no lasting meaning under the sun. The teacher does not resolve this. He does not arrive at the dreamt conclusion that God redeems the vanity. He sits with it. He acknowledges it. He says, eat, drink, enjoy the work of your hands, not because these things have cosmic significance, but because they are what you have while you have them. This is the oldest recorded human response to nihilism, and it is remarkably similar to what Camus would say 2.5 millennia later. Part 8: Why Purpose is a Story We Tell. Let us now make the case directly. Why is purpose? The idea that your life has a meaning, it is building towards a story rather than a reality. Argument 1: The universe is 13.8 billion years old. You will be alive for approximately 80 of those years. Whether you do in your 80 years, whatever you do in those 80 years will, in the context of deep time, leave no detachable trace. The sun will expand and incinerate the earth in approximately 5 billion years. Every human achievement, every monument, every book, every memory, every name gone, not dismissal, not forgotten by the living, literally physically erased. The purpose requires preference. If the purpose requires permanence, if something matters only if it endures, then nothing really matters. Argument 2: You did not choose to exist. Purpose implies direction. You are going somewhere for some reason, but you arrive with no say in this matter. You were assembled by the process. You did not initiate it. In a world you did not choose, with values and desires you did not select. If there is a purpose to your life, whose purpose is it? Not yours. You didn't set it, not God's. We have no reliable evidence of his existence or intentions, not evolutions. Evolution have no intention. It selects for reproductive success. This is not purpose, this is mechanism. Argument 3: The need for purpose is not evidence of purpose. This is perhaps the most important logical point in this entire video. Human beings desperately, biologically need to feel that their lives are meaningful. This need is so powerful that its absence is a major risk factor for depression, addiction, and suicide. But the need for something does not prove its existence. People need safety, love, justice, and these are often absent. The intensity of your need for purpose tells you something about your psychology. It tells you nothing about the structure of the universe. Argument 4: Every claimed source every claimed source of purpose dissolved under examination. Religion says your purpose comes from God, but which God? There are thousands of mutually contradictory claims about divine purpose, and no reliable method for adjudicating between them. Science says your purpose is survival and reproduction, but this is a description, not a prescription. You can survive and reproduce and feel completely purposeless. Culture says your purpose is to contribute to the society. But why does society matter? Because it perpetuates human civilization. But why does human civilization matters? Because it advances humans' well-being. But why does human well-being matters? You can trace this claim as far as you would like. Eventually, you will hit a bedrock, an assumption that was chosen, not discovered. The existentialists were right about one thing: if purpose exists, we created it. It is not found in the universe, it is not written into the structure of reality. It is a human construction, powerful, necessary, real in its effects, but a construction. But a construction. A construction, however beautiful, are not cosmic facts. Part 9: Then what? The only honest question. So we arrive at the question that every nihilist eventually faces, and that every critic of nihilism immediately raises. If nothing really means anything, if purpose is a story, if the universe is silent, if death erases everything, then what? This is where I want to be very careful, because there is a cheap nihilism and a deep nihilism, and they lead to completely different lives. Cheap nihilism says nothing matters, so nothing really matters. It is an excuse for passivity, cruelty, self destruction. It is the teenager who says everything is meaningless as a way of avoiding the difficulty of choosing and committing and caring. The nihilism is not a philosophy, it is an avoidance dressed up as a philosophy. Deep nihilism says something much harder and much more interesting. Nothing inherently matters, and therefore what you choose to make matter is entirely, completely, terrifyingly yours. This is what Nietzsche pushing towards, what Camus was pushing towards, what Schopenhauer in its most honest moments was circling. If universe provides no purpose, then the human being who create purpose, who choose what to love, what to build, what to sacrifice for, is doing something the universe itself cannot do. They are making something from nothing. They are generating meaning in meaningless place. Is the meaning cosmic? No. Is it eternal? No. Is it real? Only you can answer that. Peter Wessel Zapffe, the Norwegian philosopher and a deep ecological thinker, argued that humans are biologically overburdened. We warped too much self-awareness, too much understanding of our own morality and insignificance for our own environment to support. We cope with this. We cope with this through four strategies: isolation, anchoring, distraction, and sublimation. This video and every philosophy video ever made in sublimation, the pain of meaninglessness turned into something beautiful or at least interesting. Maybe that is enough, maybe that is more than enough. In those moments where the will falls silent and pure consciousness remains, Nietzsche found it in the dance, in the yes said to life, in full of in the yes, in the yes said to the life, in the yes said to life, in full knowledge of its strategy. Camus found it in the sun, the friendship in revolt, in life with passionate intensity in a universe that cannot match his passion. And the book of Ecclesiastes, the oldest nihilist text in the world, ends not with despair but with this: whatever your hands find to do it with all your might, not because it will last, not because the universe is watching, not because God will reward you, but because you are here now, and the breath you are breathing is happening, and then it will not be. This is not comfort, this is something better than comfort. This is honesty. Schopenhauer looked at life and saw an engine of suffering driven by blind and purposeless belief. Nietzsche looked at ruins of God and saw both catastrophe and a terrifying freedom. Camus looked at the universe's silence and decided to shout back anyway. Heidegger held his own death before him and used it to strip away every comfortable distraction. Ecclesiastes looked at everything under the sun and said, "Vapor, all of it, vapor." None of them told you to despair, all of them told you to see clearly, because the honest answer to nihilism is not to find a new illusion, it is to live without illusion, and to discover in that bare and honest state what you actually care about, not what you are actually told to care about, not what the universe endures, not what the universe endorses, what you, stripped of comfort, stripped of pretense, standing in the silence of indifferent cosmos, choose to love. The choice made in full knowledge of the void is the most human thing there is. Nihilism is not the end of meaning, it is the beginning of the only kind of meaning that was ever honest. It is the beginning of the only kind of meaning that was ever honest. Think about that. If this video cracked something open for you, something uncomfortable, something real, share it. Leave your thoughts below. I want to know where you land. And I will see you in the next one.